as an example that is exported to Europe, and then we import very nice doors and chairs, timber industry and the lumbering trade and the other pieces of furniture. That doesn't do a lot of justice to our own self-reliance, our own dignity, and our own addition space. So indeed, there is a solution, an African solution to African problems, and I like it's very, very intertwined with what Ambassador Muchanga gave us in terms of the timeline. You can see there is an agenda, there is a roadmap, there is a pathway towards getting to some of these African solutions. I think the road needs to be smoothened more and more. I am sure you have preempted some of the discussions that Dr. Yusta Kaitesi, who runs the Rwanda Governance Board, will be talking about later on this conference around governance, but it's extremely, very, very important. The road needs to be smoothened more and more. I am sure you have preempted some of the discussions that Dr. Yusta Kaitesi, who runs the Rwanda Governance Board, will be talking about later on this conference around governance. Is a good, very, very important road needs to be smoothened towards. I am sure you have preempted some of the discussions that Dr. Yusta Kaitesi, who runs the governance board, talking about later on this conference around governance. Is a good, very, very important road needs to be smoothened towards. Is a. Sure you have preempted some of the discussions that Dr. She started her career as an environment manager. Officer in Rwanda is a she started her career as an environment manager officer in Rwanda.
Thank you, Facilitator, for that special introduction. Dear Chairperson, distinguished panelists, thank you so much for the great insights. This is so energizing a session. I'm grateful to be part of that, part of the panelists today.
Thank you, Facilitator,
good morning.
special introduction.
And allow me to thank first and foremost the Rwanda chapter of the Pan-African movement for inviting me to speak on the relationship between climate change and peace in Africa. We are living through a difficult moment, and it has reminded us that we indeed have to be ready for any challenges that come our way. Climate change is one such a challenge and is not just on its way, but it's already here with us. Today I want to share some of the ways that climate change can and is affecting peace in Africa, and what we might do about it. So my presentation will therefore be divided in two parts. First, I'll talk about how climate change is affecting peace in Africa, and then I'll suggest some of the actions that can be taken to ensure that peace is less affected by climate change. First and foremost, we'll talk about human well-being and infrastructure. Climate change is causing more frequent weather-related disasters. I think this is not new to us anymore. We are living through this period, and these are affecting our way of life. In the first 4 months, for example, in Rwanda this year, floods and landslides tragically killed 159 people and injured an additional 164 in Rwanda alone. Across East Africa, the toll was much, much higher. During the same period, more than 4,000 houses were lost. To mention but a few, a lot of infrastructure were lost, were damaged, ranging from houses to bridges to roads and classrooms. This is obviously also affecting the education sector. So these extreme weather events caused by climate change are already affecting us and have the potential to even undermine many of the developmental gains we have made over the last 26 years, which has a potential to create to reduce the peace that, of course, we were enjoying. And in the worst case scenario, this could go up to instability. Secondly, water security is also another area threatened by climate change. Just like flooding, water scarcity can also impact human security and causes instability. Migration, food insecurity, and increased resource competition. Resource conflicts can arise over water, especially if availability reduces and the competition increases. It is likely to become more common, especially in semi-arid countries. I can't help but give an example of the Sahel, which was already alluded to in previous speakers. Here, the resource is very scarce, and it can only become more scarce with the ongoing climate changes that we are experiencing. In Rwanda, some of our catchment areas have seen disagreements between various users of water resources because they have different and sometimes competing priorities. So with this competition, we just heard from the previous panelists, this competition can only be divisive, cannot be constructive at all. Energy security is another area that is threatened by climate change. In many countries, power is generated by fossil fuels, oil and gas, coal, and so on. In Rwanda, much of our energy comes from hydro, which is another vulnerable source. As we have seen in many parts of the world, conflict over energy resources is too common and could increase in a carbon-constrained world, threatening peace. That is why we need to invest more in more renewable energy and work towards greater energy independence. Migration, just by the mention of the word migration, we cannot expect to have any peace around migration. Peace cannot be achieved in a country or continent when the country or continent is not stable. We need effective governance. A previous speaker really nailed this so clearly. Effective governance and the rule of law, as well as predictable climate and weather patterns. In places where weather-related disasters are becoming more common and where agriculture is the main source of employment and income, climate change has the potential to force people off their land and cause them to search for more stable climes. Indeed, the World Bank has estimated that by 2050, there would be more than 143 million climate refugees from Latin America, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. What are we doing to reduce this very alarming figure that has been indicated in this study? I think that's the reason for the discussions today. In 2017, 68.5 million people were forcibly displaced, more than at any point in human history. Approximately one-third of these people were forced to move by sudden onset weather events. I think we all remember the disasters in Southern Africa, the IGIHE, the Kenneth, and so on. These were all causing a lot of migrations, and they are a great indication of limited peace that is coming from that is being caused by climate change. So what can we do to ensure that climate change does not overwhelm our societies and threaten the peace we enjoy. First and foremost, we need to understand the reality we are facing. Climate change is already happening and will continue to get worse, regardless of what we do. But the question is how bad it gets and how much it affects us. However, it's still under control if we know the problem and we are geared to work towards reducing the impacts. That's why there are two key things we need to do right now: address the root causes of the problem and integrate climate concerns into all aspects of our lives. These two elements are known as mitigation and adaptation. Colleagues in this environment, colleagues in this area are familiar with these two terminologies. So we need to, mitigation is tackling the problem at its root cause, and this is exactly what we need to be doing. The world is getting warmer, and this changing the climate weather patterns, so much so that it's becoming harder for us to manage the damage, the damage that is being caused. That is why we need to immediately address the root causes of the problem and reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we are putting into the atmosphere by going green. Doing so will limit how quickly the temperature rises and buy us more time to actually adapt. And then adaptation, the second issue that we need, the approach that we need to take is we need to adapt to the changing environment. Rwanda has reacted quickly and in a coordinated fashion to the threat posed by COVID-19. We think we must do the same for climate change. We need cross-sectoral action and ensure we are resilient to the changes that are already underway. We need the economic, social, and governance clusters to work together to consider climate change in everything that we do. We can no longer say that going green is, like a luxury. It is a necessity. We need to be moving towards that direction. It is an essential responsibility for any government and must be part of every strategy that we are developing. So that is why in Rwanda, just released its updated climate target to reduce emissions by 38% over the next 10 years compared to business as usual. We are aiming to invest approximately over $11 billion to achieve this goal and boost our resilience. While this sounds a lot of money, the good news is that such investments have a very high return and will ensure our society has the capacity to adapt to the challenges and benefit from green growth. The country has also put in place institutions. The institutional setup is really robust and is geared to work towards influencing the economic development to be resilient to the impacts of the changing climate. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, as with the environmental challenge, we need everyone on board to solve the problem. That's especially true for a goal issue like climate change. And this, we cannot afford to stay behind as Africa. We need to tackle this challenge aggressively because we are more vulnerable to these changes, regardless of the fact that we are less contributors to the problem. And this we cannot afford to. That's why we need to limit our emissions. We cannot say that we are less contributing. We still have to aim at developing in the right direction and build economies and communities that are resilient to extreme weather events and other impacts of climate change. Doing so will certainly with will provide the stability that we all need to live in a peaceful and prosperous lives. With that, Mr. Chair, I want to thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to speak at this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Kawera, for those very rich words. Usually environmentalists are known to be alarmists, but you paint us a big picture and give us a wake-up call. I think three particular things that I get out of there. One, the importance of government responsibility. Second thing is you also, just like Professor Adebayo, emphasize the importance of solidarity. Everybody has to be in this. We share borders, but you say something that is kind of a spanner in the works. You say that Africa is more vulnerable than the other continents, yet we are less contributors in terms of carbon emissions and degradation of our environment, which is very, very in the works. You say that Africa is. Just before we move to our discussants, Dr. Kaitesi and Robert from the Private Sector Federation, I want to open up some comments and questions that we may have. I also want to thank those who have been sending through your comments. We've seen them, Ladislas, Ms. Annie Kairawa, Dr. Rusivana, Odette Wamaria, we thank you so much. Ambassador Hope Tumukunde, thank you for your comments. Yvette, you've kept us very busy. Frank as well, we thank you so much for your comments. I'll request that all the panelists, if you can go to the chat room and see some of the comments, and when we come back to you, if you contribute to those that are directly under you, if there are any questions or clarifications, that would be very helpful. But I will ask that Ambassador Fatuma, you unmute your mic and give us your question or comment. Come back to you. If you contribute to those that are directly under you, if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I want to first of all thank the speakers for their brilliant presentations. And I have a question for Ambassador Albert Mchanga. I was so much interested about the African continental the African integration, intercontinental trade. The speakers for their, but my concern is how, and I have a question how they link up, how we link up with the regional economic communities, because as we know, regional integration economic communities are building blocks to the African Union integration. I have a feeling that the link is not so strong. So what are we doing to make sure that there are lessons learned, for example, from the customs union, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that what is happening at Rex is feeding into the AFCTA. The second concern I have is on the fight against COVID. Again, I realized that there is a lot of infrastructure in terms of coordination and the building of synergy at the African Union. I also wanted to see how we are linking up with the region, with the sub-region, for example, the East African community and other risks in the fight against COVID, because the issue of harmonization and collaboration is still weak. Every country has its own way of fighting the COVID. Some are under lockdown, others are just praying to God to have to address the pandemic. So how do we really ensure that there is that synergy between the mother continent and also the RICS? Finally, was the presentation made by Professor Adebayo, which was very inspiring. especially on unpacking and also promoting a new narrative about governance in Africa. Finally, was by promoting values like, for example, self-reliance, dignity. It was very inspiring. I'm happy that in Rwanda, Agaciro and also is a building block of whatever we do about governance in Africa. Rediscovering Africa, the issue of solidarity. Values like, for example, I wanted to know from the African Union perspective what we are doing to inculcate these values within our educational system so that the young generation who are the drivers of the AU Agenda 2063, the issue of solidarity, really take up these values at the young age because they are the future of our continent. So I just wanted to know what we are doing to institutionalize these important values. Thank you very much. The AU Agenda 2063, the issue of solidarity.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Fatuma. We will come back to the responses in a short while, but I'm sure that's very. How do we trade better amongst ourselves, Ambassador Muchanga? The synergies. Are we coordinating very well with regional blocks and other global initiatives? The synergies with AU, whether it is for COVID fight or trade, COMESA, East African Community, the ECOWAS, and such that we are not replicating. I think Ambassador Mchanga, you come back with that. And yes, we did. Thank you so much. I want to go to Solange Uingare. Let me request that the others who are going to give their questions or comments, in the interest of time, we will restrict them to only one, and then we'll move on. Over to you, Solange. Yes, we did. Thank you so much. I want to go to Solange Uingare. Let me request that the others who are going to give their questions or comments, in the interest of time, we will restrict them to only one, and then we'll move on. Over to you, Solange. Thank you so much. Yes, Solange, please give us your question or comment. We can see your hand up. Let me request that the others who are going to give their questions or comments, in the interest of time, we will restrict them to only one. Okay, Solange doesn't seem to be there. We will go to Dr. Please give us your question or comment. We can see your hand up. There's someone who did put up their hand earlier on. Yes, because Dr. Ndushavandi had put up his hand. Are you there, Dr. Ndushavandi?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please proceed with your question or comment. Hand earlier on. Yes, because Dr. Ndushavandi had put up his hand. Are you there, Dr. Ndushavandi?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please.
And thank you for our panel. Do you think Pan-African movement and ideology today, we are still focusing on leaders and political leaders who drive very well this movement, but we are not highlighting very well the mass movement, the student movement, which can inspire our young people today, and even women. Have we had women engage in this as it can inspire women today and having this gender perspective? Second, and very brief to my friend Adebayo, is about governance and specifically for foreign policy. Do you think today Africa can have a doctrine which is sustainable, institutionalized, defining a foreign policy towards other countries, but international organizations, especially financial organizations, to define the aid and debt policy, which can go beyond just leaders on powers, who are doing a great job today with the new renaissance or new emergence of leaders, to stabilize African position and its image on international scene. How do you judge this foreign policy perspective from African perspective? Thank you, moderator. With the new renaissance or new emergence of leaders,
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndushamani, for those very loaded questions. I'd like to first of all go to Ambassador Muchanga and then come to Professor Debayo for your reactions towards those interventions that have come through. Thank you. So, Ambassador Muchanga first.
Thank you very much, moderator. I'll be very, very brief in the interest of time. The regional economic communities participated in the negotiation of the agreement establishing the African continental free trade area. And one of the principles that we followed in these negotiations is the principle of acquis, meaning we are going to respect the institutions and the programs of the regional economic communities as we build the African continental free trade area. And they've also participated in the negotiations. And as we now look at issues of rules of origin, tariff concessions, and trade in services, so that we facilitate trade across Africa seamlessly. And the regions are key to this. We are looking at issues of infrastructure development. The regions will be very key in the development of physical infrastructure, facilitated trade. The regions are key to this. We are looking at issues of transparency so that we build mutual benefits. One of the controversial recommendations we have made, and member states are still questioning it. My idea issues of in each of the regional economic communities, there should be a police officer, senior police officer from the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and similarly, from each of the regional economic communities, there should be senior police officers in the office of the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, so that they are aware of what is going on a daily basis. That way, you are going to promote transparency and build mutual trust. So that framework is underway, and we hope member states are going to buy it in. Because it's a document that is still under discussion. When I submit my written comments, I'll just mention in brief that we are developing a framework of collaboration. I will not attach it to a document which is going to end very much. Now, the way that we have organized the African centers for disease control is that they've got regional officers in all the 5 regions of Africa: East Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, and so forth. Now, there is seamless coordination in the fight. And immediately in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, immediately the pandemic broke out, the Commissioner for Social Affairs called for a meeting of ministers of health from across Africa, and they attended, come up with a coordinated response. And that is going on currently. So we are coordinating very much. Then in terms of trade flows, I indicated in my remarks that when the process of developing and operating a trade commodity, trade corridor, so that essential goods that are very critical to fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, including food, are able to pass through borders, even if there could be some lockdowns. And eventually, when the pandemic is over, we are not going to destroy this institutional arrangement. It will be a permanent feature of the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And again, the regional economic communities are very much involved in the development of this trade corridor. So they are partners in progress. Thank you. Feature of the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And again, the regional economic communities are very much involved in the development of this trade corridor. So they are partners in progress. Thank you. Feature of the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And again, the regional economic communities are very much involved in the development of this trade corridor. So they are partners in progress. Thank you.
I suppose it's. Are you hearing me, moderator? Because
yes,
I didn't
hear you. Yes.
Fantastic. I hear you now. Okay, thank you so very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fatuma. Good to see you. Happy Africa Day. I very much share your view, implicit in the question which you raised, that part of the challenge which we need to address as a continent, even if it might seem self-evident at the national level, at least in specific countries where steps have been taken, such as Rwanda, born out of its own history and recent experience. That is absolutely necessary that we reintroduce and do so on the basis of a shared strategic consideration. History and civics education grounded in the kind of Africa we want to build in the curriculum of schools. And you know, we had all of these actually in many of our countries in the first decades of independence. As a primary school pupil, as secondary school student in my own country, Nigeria, I did learn a lot about the history and cultures of other parts of the continent as a standard part of curriculum, compulsory for all of us to take, alongside what were considered to be the core values that were taught in civics. But somehow over time this got completely expunged from our curriculum. And this is true for most of the continent, including most recently taking out history teaching from the syllabus of many schools on the argument that we need to invest more in science and technology. And I want to submit those are not incompatible. You don't provide education just in the air for the sake of it. Otherwise, you'll simply be training people into a certain void without having a proper strategic end in mind. And at this point in time, those values of self-respect, of dignity, of solidarity, that are integral to the Pan-African ideal, things which we can reintroduce into teaching and also socializing the next generation of Africans, so that we can begin to rebuild a mass foundation for the kind of developmental shifts that we want to see across the continent. You're also right, my brother Eric, good to see you too. Your comment about the role of mass movement is particularly important. It was a problem of time that made me to abridge my presentation. I was actually going to come to the central importance. You know, the chair, I was seeing the chair right on the screen, and his body language, I was interpreting it. Coming time, and I was conscious of it. But one of the points I wanted to make was of the need, again, as part of our governance challenges, to debureaucratize Pan-Africanism, please. Let us debureaucratize Pan-Africanism. It is good to have institutions that will help us to encapsulate the ideals that we forge for ourselves. But those institutions must not go rogue and become bureaucratic machines, behemoths that are beyond the control of citizens and leaders. And here the role of mass movements becomes extremely important. And one of the key elements for me in this regard within the architecture of the African Union will be to find a way to revitalize ECOSOC, the ECOSOC of the African Union, which is a unique African construction, to serve as a citizens' platform and to underpin the work of ECOSOC, not so much with NGO-type organizations, but mass movements. We need to bring in more trade unions. Only very few of them are involved. We need to bring in more students' organizations. Only very few of them them are involved, so that we can begin to again build a new mass basis. But connected to that is also something which you have led the way in showing in Rwanda is possible, which is the free movement of people on the continent. Because how do you build solidarity amongst people and get Africans to also build cross-border Pan-African movements of the kind that can interact with each other on a continuing basis if you don't open up the borders for Africans to be able to move freely and to engage with one another and to organize things together. So I do subscribe to the drift of your observation that the mass movement was always an important part of the Pan-African ideal. Marcus Garvey's Return to Africa movement, when it was conceived, was a mass movement. And Kwame Nkrumah's fight for independence, or Amilcar Cabral, or Samora Moises Machel, or even the Ujamaa policy of Walimu Nyerere, and so on and so forth, also had mass underpinnings to them, appealing directly to the masses and helping them, and supporting them and inspiring them to self-organize in order to be part of the work of transformation and renaissance before us. Thank you. And helping them, or even supporting them and inspiring them to self-organize in order to be part of the work of transformation and renaissance before us. Thank you. And helping them, or even supporting them and inspiring them to self-organize in order to be part of the work of transformation and renaissance before us. Thank you. And helping them, or even supporting them and inspiring them to self-organize in order to be part of the work of transformation and renaissance before us. Thank you. And helping them, or even supporting them and inspiring them to self-organize.
Call upon call upon. I am told you did not hear that very elaborate introduction of Dr. Esther Kaitesi. She's the CEO of the Rwanda Governance Board. She's a former academician. She's an attorney. She's a member of the Rwandan Bar and also a member of the East African Law Society. I'd like to call upon Dr. Esther Kaitesi to kindly come on board and tell us about the kind of governance that will work for Africa. She's a member of the Rwandan Bar and also a member of the East African Law Society. I'd like to call upon Dr. Esther Kaitesi to kindly come on board and tell us about the kind of governance that will work for Africa. She's a member of the Rwandan Bar and also a member of the East African Law Society. I'd like to call upon Dr. Esther Kaitesi to kindly come on board and tell us about the kind of governance that will work for Africa. Dr. Kaitesi, are you there? If Dr. Kaitesi is not yet there, if the chairman of the Private Sector Federation, that's the umbrella organization of all business people in Rwanda, gentleman who is a very, very seasoned businessman with interests in trade, hospitality, real estate, and much more. Mr. Robert Vapakurera, I would like to bring you on board to talk about the role of the private sector in regional integration and promotion of intra-Africa trade. My friend Robert, you're there? I would like to
there, Chair.
to talk about good. Karibu sana, Robert. Private sector in regional integration.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. I thank the Pan-African Movement Rwanda chapter who have given me this chance to talk about the role of private sector in the promotion of the regional integration and the promotion of intra-Africa movement. I would start by saying that in my observation, there have been regional and the promotion of intra-Africa movement. I would start by saying that in my observation, there have been regional and the promotion of intra-Africa movement. I would start by saying that in my observation, there have been regional promotion of intra-Africa movement. I would start by saying that in my observation, there have been regional promotion of intra-Africa. I would start by saying that in my
I think we lost Robert. Robert, are you there? I've line. Maybe it could be an issue with Robert, are you there? Intra-Africa network. Maybe I've line. Maybe it could be an issue. Robert, are you on now? Are you back on? Robert, are you there? Intra-Africa network. Maybe I've line. Maybe it could be an issue. Robert, are you on now? Are you back on? Robert, are you there? Intra-Africa network. Maybe as we figure out, as we get back Robert on board, I am going to read some comments that have been coming through, and to give time to come back on board as we figure out. And again, thank you so much for all. As we get back Robert on board.
Hello?
I am going to read some.
Can you hear?
Yes, Robert, you may proceed from where we are. Sorry, we had lost you. And
yes. So I was saying that the intra-Africa trade or intra-region trade, take example of COMESA or East Africa, is still low, even though these regional integration have been there for a long time. One of the reasons I had cited is that the private sector in Africa production is still low, and we are not getting diversified products to be consumed by people in these regions. And that's why people are moving in other regions, make sure they get those products. So my suggestion is that the role of private sector in this kind of integration, it needs a lot of work in terms of relationship, in terms of collective investment, in terms of partnership, and even countries to allow investors from Africa to invest in those regions whereby the raw materials are cheaper and even there is the availability of the market. I think I will call upon the private sector to understand the size of the market we have in the region. If you take example, East Africa, we have about 200, the population of about 200 million. We have in Africa 1.2 billion population, whereby we have big market. Secondly, I think some of the things the leaders have to iron out is the movement of people. People are not free to move in the whole of Africa or in the region. Whereby work permit, investment, visas are all still a problem in private sector or other people moving to the region. So there is a lot to benefit from the intra-African trade, given that the tariffs the non-tariff barriers have been reduced, the tariff are being reduced, the incentives have been given, but accessing them is still a challenge from country to country. So the private sector has to work very, very hard to visit each other, to visit the countries related. If you go to West Africa, where like Nigeria, where there's big market, big demand, and so on, it is easy if you're Rwandese and you visit those countries and invest and trade with them, take products from Rwanda, but still there's a challenge like you have to get a visa, work permit, and so on and so forth. I'll do just give example for Rwanda. Rwanda has done a lot of things to make it easy for either African and other visitors to come to Rwanda, like removing a visa in some places. If you invest a lot of money, they remove the tax for several years. Yeah, there's a lot of benefit. So I think if all countries could emulate the Rwanda best practices, I hope they will achieve intra-Africa and intra-region trade. I would also take example of COMESA. COMESA is about 19 countries in Africa, which are together and have trade benefits to the members. I would also take example, and the trade between the COMESA countries is not also big, and you ask yourself why. But the reason I would give is that the production in this region is still very low. Few products are coming from the region. So if we don't enhance the production and increase the products, increase the volumes, then it will be very hard to benefit from the regional integration. So the private sector need to work together, either in a way of collective investment or partnership, or of industries to where the raw materials are available, in order to make sure that people in the region have what to consume. Private sector of different countries have confined in their countries, and they are not able to go different countries in order to produce, to expand, and either relocate depending on the advantage available. Secondly, when you look at the cross-border trading, it increases the market also. Actually, like if you see Rwanda, trading between Congo and Rwanda, Goma side, and the trading between Rwanda and the Congo on Kavu side is very lively and is very interesting, and people are happy with that. We are hoping, I would hope that if it would happen, even in further than the neighboring countries, then we would be increasing our benefits due to the regional cooperation. So coming to intra-Africa is the same way. You find that there is also another issue which private sector has to work very hard on is about corruption. The corruption levels in different countries, there are different corruption levels in different countries, and when you go in one country to another, you have to learn how to operate in that country due to the levels of corruption. So if private sector could work hard with government to fight corruption, and everybody is free to move and operate and do the same way he's doing it to different countries, it will also be easy to achieve the goals of Africa trade. Those are some of the things I think private sector can do in order to promote regional and intra-Africa. Coming to experiences we have got in COVID-19, in Rwanda, it was, of course, an interruption to the economy of Rwanda, but Rwanda worked very, very hard to make sure people don't lose lives, and it was the primary objective of Rwanda to fight COVID-19. By I think since March this year, March 19, there was an announcement of a quarantine of anybody coming out of the country to come and stay in quarantine for 14 days. This has helped to make sure it doesn't circulate around Rwanda, and now the Rwanda economy is like 90% open. You can be able to work with no threat. Two is that what we are learning from this is that we have again to strengthen our local production, because this do not allow goods and services to come from other countries. As you know very well, flights are not moving, people are not moving, though the trucks were allowed to move, but also with a lot of challenges. As you know, there are a lot of challenges movement, because the trucks have to move from one country to another. There is a possibility that the drivers can transmit the corona from one country to another. Because of a lot of controls, there is also causing a lot of other problems. I think we have had what has happened. Drivers in Tanzania side refusing to come to Rwanda because of the measures which were put in Rwanda. But the measures has helped Rwanda to make sure it's open. People can work inside the country. You'll find that corona is limited to almost zero. Also, this also helps us to learn that we have to encourage our people, the private sector, to more engage on internet solutions or the ICT solutions, whereby you have to partner with other people in other countries and you operate online. This would reduce the issue whereby you would be in shortage of some goods and services which you would need in the country. Thirdly, what we have promoted in Rwanda is operate online internet banking. Today, many people and our president promoted whereby each family could have a phone and people can be able to operate online. Operating online by paying online, mobile money, internet banking, and so on is also another solution to this pandemic, because people could money from the bank to zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very interesting thing. He said something that was very interesting, that people have. So in one country, you have movement. Ambassador Muchava says as of today, African deficit and services will increase the imports. But I will give your reaction after
the opportunity. The rule of three things that alienated now. Use the non-alienated basis that we are governing for, that we are addressing in the past and the future. Therefore, I will mentioned earlier to eradicate corruption, as the non-alienated basis. Rwanda, 20 years a good time to reflect. We are addressing in the past a description within the vision 20 is coming to the end. Described. I think the relationship that we govern and the resource of Africa within the vision is key. So how do we stay accountable? How do we have in terms of involved action? sources. How the participation of the people stay accountable? So the people, the African continent has probably the youngest population in the world. That demographic dividend that we have actually must be a participant in the whole process. So, population of all allow we want but remains the and disoriented of constrained. I know that I don't have to do my observations. Good years ago, was considered as a minimum condition to stimulate and all the as put together. So, it has a institution then confronting, you can relationship between in terms of to the COVID. The centrality for accountability. Because at the behavior of the trust that they so the COVID during partnership between citizen participation and the leader remains the presence of a community and want to participate sector that ensure effectively used. I would say as an African, that's what yields the past and we serve in delivering public. Thank you.
People who are good to that. Really, but it need to come back to you. To ensure some of these gaps can be some of these
combine each country with the political actors, with civic leaders, religious, traditional, cultural, all those with the family, the arena. I think that is very earlier. Its energy, other areas with Libya, that's why they say exceptional. They also refer to the Central African Republic. That's another case that one. But we have on this issue of the gun than the negative.
Dr. Kambudzi, we are me also
this sector. Yeah. But countries must also ensure they are benefiting from the impact on
It's
economic governance structures reflect the presence of the population, so the participation of the population. Having an African leadership that is fully committed to pursuing the ambitions of the youthful and future populations of Africa, and at the center of that also allowing the space to be innovative. So having an Africa that allows the population therein to be part of the solutions to the problems that the continent has. And finally, I think I cannot underscore the need for accountability and the need of seeking consensus and pursuing our togetherness all together. Thank you. Therein to be part of the solutions to the problems that the continent has. And finally, I think I cannot underscore the need.
Professor Adebayo, over to you now. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaitesi.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chair. And apologies, I also got cut off when Dr. Kaitesi began her earlier
Professor Adebayo, over to you now. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaitesi.
I suppose at this point, all I can do is reiterate what I consider to be the central message I would like to share with the participants in this year's African Liberation Day celebration, which is essentially to say that as Africans, it is incumbent on us to be ambitious for ourselves, central message to find the courage and the audacity to claim our right to development and our right to chart the path to development, which we feel is most appropriate and attuned to our circumstances and our needs. In doing so, I think that is where we will be able to mobilize the necessary legitimacy from citizens in support of efforts and interventions which we introduce in order to transform livelihood. And forget that the central purpose of governance and development in Africa is precisely to improve human livelihood and security on the continent, and understanding that these go together as twin projects. Governance will always be something that we should keep on our radar at all times. Thank you very much indeed, and happy Africa Liberation Day to everybody. And understanding that these go together as twin.
Much appreciated, Professor Adebayo. It was a very, very interesting, and I think you added quite a bit of life into this conference. I would thank you so much. I'd also, this particular moment, like to thank everyone who participated in this conference. Apologies for the mishap that we had here and there with technology and the late start. I believe it's also along the ways of a journey towards a pan-African internet and African solutions. But to wrap this up, I'll ask Dr. Ismail Buchanan, who's the Vice Chair of the Rwanda chapter for the Pan-African movement, to wrap this up for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you to our speakers and presenters and the discussants for today's conference. Comrades, commissioners from Pan-Africa Movement Rwanda chapter, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Charles. I am deeply honored to be with you once again to deliver my closing remarks. And of course, on behalf of our chairperson, Honorable Musoni, who is not here with us due to some story we mentioned before, we really want to thank you for joining us for this celebration of Africa Liberation Day 2020. And of course, as I remind you, is that I mentioned that the 25th May is a very important date in the history of all of us, especially we Africans. And of course, we mark this day to remind ourselves of the greatest contribution of our ancestry now who really struggled to build the society that we are having and to deliberately free Africa as a continent, especially from colonial masters, and to make sure that we African can depend on ourselves, and of course by working closely with the others together. So while at the same time we recognize the challenges of our continent, still in fully we enjoy its independence and free itself from any who want to control the continent of Africa, so that we entitle to make sure that the governance, the issue of human rights, the issue of political, economic, and social, environmental rights, as well as right to peace, availability to all Africans and African themselves. So on behalf of Honorable Chair, I would like to, of Pan-Africa Movement, I would like to thank you all for joining us in this celebrating for this African Liberation Day 2020. I do believe that committing ourselves to put into action and implement what our speakers, our discussants, and presenters have said, and come together as one people and as Africans, I can assure you that these are not empty pledges that some of us, special speakers and discussants, has talked about. So it is also on this note that I would like to thank you all, our speakers, once again our invited guests, discussants, all of you comrades and the commissioners from Pan-Africa Movement, for being with us, and especially in any time that we call you as Pan-Africa Movement is concerned, and wherever you are, you really show us that how fully you are committed and you are ready to be part of the solution of the continent of Africa. Allow me also to recognize the team which really fully participated to make sure that this event, and they worked tirelessly to make sure that the event of African Liberation Day can take place. This is my thanks goes to Pan-Africa Movement team, including MINAFET staff, who really work night and day to make sure that this African Day can be celebrated. And I thank you from bottom of my heart, and on behalf of the chairman of Pan-Africa Movement, I take this opportunity to make officially the close of this event. Thank you. Murakoze, merci, asante. God bless you. Thank you from bottom of my heart, and on behalf of the chairman of Pan-Africa Movement, I take this opportunity to make officially the close of this event. Thank you. Murakoze, merci, asante.